What is going on, all of you amazing gamers out there in the world? I'm MegaAmpster. Thank you for being here. Whether you're a new or returning viewer, appreciate you taking the time. Really means a lot. Thank you so much. With that, this is going to be a fun one. This is going to be my video for my top 5 favorite pieces of video game specific hardware. Now, I say hardware because I wanted to include both consoles and handhelds. It only felt fair because I played a lot of handheld games in my lifetime, grew up playing them, I still play them to this day. So we're going to include both consoles and handhelds here. And the way I'm kind of judging them is based off of, you know, not just the hardware itself, how it performs, how it looks, how it feels, but also the software library, because I think that really adds a lot to a platform as a whole. I think it's good to kind of look at both sides and weigh them equally and then kind of see from there. So that is kind of my judging criteria for this list. Now, before we get into it, I do want to mention several pieces of hardware that did not make the cut. So for the ones that I don't own anymore, I wanted to include systems I still own so we can kind of take a look at each in the camera and judge them based on their visuals too. So for those, that would be Game Boy Color. Don't own that anymore. Loved playing Pokemon back in the day. Just don't have it. The original Xbox, don't have that either. The disk drive stopped working. Had some great memories with it. Probably still wouldn't have made the cut either way. The DS Lite, that would have almost made the cut, but I don't own it anymore, and I can play DS games in other ways that we'll get into. And also the original Wii, shout out to Brandon, friend of the channel. He has my Wii now, and it's supposedly working great. So don't own that anymore. So those 4, not going to even consider them because I don't own them anymore, but I have good memories of all of those. Now, in terms of honorable mentions, I mean, first, we got to get this one out of the way. The dishonorable mention, that would be the Wii U. Like, great software. I still stand by the software being great. I know most of those games are on the Switch now, so not a ton exclusive to it anymore, but the hardware, man, the gamepad, first of all, battery, terrible, but also just the feel of it itself. It felt like a fragile Fisher-Price toy. It was just like, I don't know, the Switch to me does everything that the Wii U tried to do and failed at, but Switch obviously does it way better. So Wii U, because of the gamepad, I can't include it here. Honorable mentions though, and I know, don't get too mad. The GameCube, I did not grow up with. I've only owned my GameCube for not even 5 years as of this recording. Great games, most of which I'd played on other systems that they've been re-released on. The design itself, I'm not a big fan of. Powerful hardware, great games, just didn't quite make the cut. Not as much nostalgia for me with the GameCube there. I didn't grow up with it. The Xbox 360, though, quite a bit of nostalgia. The design's okay. The Red Ring of Death definitely lowered it here. But, you know, almost made the cut. Considered it for sure. And lastly, the Steam Deck, I felt like might have been cheating a little bit just because, you know, the largest software catalog in terms of like all sorts of PC games, it really just is an extension of the PC. And the hardware itself, I'm not the biggest fan of the form factor, but just mainly because of the PC games, I felt like it wasn't fair to include it here. But with that, let's get into the actual top 5 list here. Now, number 5 is the newest piece of hardware on this top 5 list. It is from an interesting platform holder. You could argue the software may not be necessarily up to snuff, but it has some interesting features, and for me, it's really the hardware and the design of it that carries it to number 5 here. Ignore all the stupid stickers I have on these. Number 5 for me is the Xbox Series X. Now, in terms of the software, you know, yeah, like I said, like the exclusives aren't really for me when it comes to Xbox, but having Game Pass as an option, I'm not subscribed because I'm not a fan of the subscription service for games, but having the option's cool. The backwards compatibility, I love. Xbox is doing the best job out of the 3 platform holders in terms of their overall catalog over the years in terms of backwards compatibility, like being able to play Morrowind or, you know, Sonic Unleashed or Sonic Generations at 4K 60 frames. Like, that's awesome. And so many other games. Hopefully they'll add more in the future, but for me, it's really the hardware, the box itself. Now, you could argue, dude, it's just a rectangle, but listen, this is a really damn good rectangle, all right? I personally prefer the sleek designs, the simple, sleek designs to, like, let's compare them. Okay, the PS5. I am not a fan of that design. I know some people are, and that's okay if you are. I just think it looks kind of clunky, and I don't think it looks good. Whereas this, I would be proud to display this next to my TV. It is very sleek. I love the little holes in the top that get, oh, the green's big, the green's small, the green, you know, it's just fun. Almost disrupted. The stand here, very nice to have. It sits on my floor here. It's just very sleek. Great 4K player as well. Just, I don't know, I really, the look of the hardware goes a long way for me, and that's definitely what carries this to number 5. The software doesn't keep it, it keeps it from getting any higher, but, you know, still really good to be on number 5 on this list. Number 4, we are getting smaller form factor here. Now, this one, almost a decade prior to the Series X here, This is really what got me. This is one of the platforms that really got me into Nintendo first party games. Like I had played Nintendo games before, but mostly third party ones on their other platforms. But this one really got me into it. Great software library, great features. The hardware itself not as interesting, but it's still a good system nonetheless. And that at number 4 is the Nintendo 3DS. Now, shout out to Brandon again. He has my original 3DS that I gave to him so he could experience those games. This is the 3DS XL I got a few years ago as of this recording. And the hardware itself, I love the clamshell design, classic. Some interesting things about the 3DS. I mean, the circle pad I actually really like, although sometimes it gets a little stuck. I like it. The little nub here, exclusive to the XL, it's okay. The main gimmick, of course, being the 3D slider. Certain games utilize it really well. The main one that comes to mind for me is Super Mario 3D Land, which is really fun and completely different game if you don't play with 3D. I think the 3D really enhances it for sure. But otherwise, like the form factor's a little flimsy in certain areas. The customization, awesome. I love the custom themes on the menus, especially shout out to the Dreamcast theme. I love that thing with the different sound effects. I don't know if this one you can swap out the plates with. Let me know in the comments below, but a lot of them you could swap out and customize the different plates here. And of course, the small form factor is nice, but also the supporting software like Street Pass. I remember putting my 3DS in sleep mode, walking around and collect those play tokens to then get puzzle pieces or passing other people and getting little gifts from them in the Street Pass Plaza. Like that was such a cool thing. I would love for Nintendo to bring that back with whatever hardware they make next. But the software lineup, I mean, first of all, the Virtual Console, fantastic. I played so many old NES and Game Boy games on this little thing here, and got exposure to a lot of game series because of that, but also just like the core first party content. I mean, like I said, Mario 3D Land, really underrated Mario game, honestly. Link Between Worlds, in my opinion, one of the best Zelda games ever made, better than its inspiration. I said that. Anyways, Kirby Trip Deluxe and Planet Robobot, some of my favorite 2D Kirby games ever. Metroid Samus Returns, fantastic remake of Metroid 2. Mario Kart 7 really refining the controls and establishing the groundwork for Mario Kart 8, which in my opinion is the best Mario Kart. So many great games. Kid Icarus Uprising, I will say, is a little limited by the handheld form factor, but still a really creative and fun game nonetheless. Smash 3DS. I personally love Smash 3DS more than Wii U, and I think it's so unique and still holds up. I will say, obviously not the ideal way to play Smash Brothers being in a handheld format, but it's so unique, and I think it's really cool to have it there. Overall, hardware, The gimmick could have been utilized more. I call it gimmick because it's not fully utilized, but the software definitely elevates 3DS for me. I put so much time into the 3DS growing up, so that is number 4 on this list. Now, number 3 is an older handheld that I have a lot of this is nostalgia for this one, but I love this little thing, and the games have aged very well. Very visually appealing, but simple, kind of like the Series X, like I mentioned. And I mean, let's just get into it right here. Number 3 for me is the Game Boy Advance. Specifically, I'm talking about the SP. I did not own the original growing up, but once again, clamshell design coming from this. Love it. It's just so simple. It's so small, great form factor. Open it up. The D-pad and the buttons are so good. Of course, you got the classic little Game Boy launch screen. You can't go wrong with that. And the games themselves, I mean, some great games. Like I mentioned with the 3DS part, I really didn't play a ton of first-party Nintendo games, but like, I have such fond memories of the games that I did play here. Like Super Mario Advance was the way I played Super Mario Bros. 2 USA growing up. Loved that version. I mean, Sonic Advance Trilogy. So much time put into those games. They have aged so well. Maybe not in terms of level design, but in terms of like aesthetic and music, fantastic. We don't talk about Sonic Battle. Wario Land 4, great little kind of 2D platformer collectathon game. Like, I played a lot of licensed games on this thing too, but just this little system has aged so well. It is literally a portable Super Nintendo, and in terms of like those like types of visuals, I think the Super Nintendo is one of the best aged consoles of all time. This is just a portable version of that, and it's fantastic. The one thing that knocks it down a little bit, and I believe, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I believe the original Game Boy Advance had a headphone jack. This doesn't. This only has the little speaker down there, which kind of stinks. I wish, as someone who loves to listen to audio, just not be distracting other people while I'm playing, especially in a portable format, which you kind of need. It's kind of annoying to not have that, but definitely not a huge issue. I love this thing. I had a blue one growing up, and then I had to buy a silver one a few years ago to replace it, but it's so simple. I love it, and it has such great games. So definitely nostalgia bringing it up to number 3, but I can't help it. It's a great little system. Number 2, we are getting back into the console territory here. A lot of you are going to be surprised about this one, that it's not number 1, but I really had to take an objective look and reevaluate my criteria here. I love this thing. This was my first video game system ever that I ever played, that my family ever owned, and I will always have fond memories for it. Some of the most creative visually and artistically games ever released, and unfortunately, the last system in what used to be a first-party company's legacy in terms of their hardware manufacturing. And that, at number 2, is the Sega Dreamcast. I love this thing, but listen, I'm not gonna sit here and say this is the best thing of all time. I can't do it. I can't do it. I know this is my favorites list, but I can't have it be number 1. There's something that surpasses it. The design overall, not super visually appealing, the gray white look nowadays, but it's so nostalgic for me. This thing screams like a banshee when you play discs and you open it up, and it goes like when you load a game. I love it. I don't care. I love this thing. This is like the 3rd Dreamcast I've ever owned. They are prone to breaking, but this is all nostalgia for me. Opening up the menu when you don't have a valid disc in to, listen to audio, like back when you could listen to music on CDs in these consoles, and just like very, very fun UI like that. Like a shout out to the Dreamcast theme on the 3DS because it reminds me of this thing. The controller, I will say, really one of the worst controllers for video game consoles ever made. It is probably about something like the N64 controller for me, but it is still not very comfortable. But the VMU, I mean, come on, we got to talk about little screen. Back when I played Sonic Adventure, whenever you play a specific character, their icon shows up there. Or like Tony Hawk, when you do a really cool trick, it goes radical, like stuff like that. Really adds something to the game. They should bring that back. They don't need to. And the rumble pack separately, like the controller itself is really not great, but the thumbstick's terrible. But it's nostalgic for me, And the games, I mean, the Sonic Adventure games, Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, Space Channel 5, Samba de Amigo, Shenmue, Skies of Arcadia, and granted, a lot of those I did not play growing up, but like House of the Dead, Power Stone, I get to shout out Power Stone again. Like some of the most visually interesting games, artistically interesting games, in my opinion, still ever released by, I will say, by a once first-party console manufacturer. Like such a creative library. And I hope, that's why it's so cool to see Sega bring back some of their older IPs that we know of as of now, because a lot of them got entries on the Dreamcast and they were so creative. And the hardware itself, that's why I couldn't put it at number 1, because the hardware itself is really not great, but nostalgia's carrying it up to number 2, which is still very impressive. So that is number 2 on the list now. Number 1, this is, in my opinion, I had to take it. It also might be objectively the best hardware that's ever been released, and you could argue otherwise, but as someone who, like I said, was a big handheld gaming fan growing up, I always thought console and handhelds would be separate. So when this company did, in my mind, the impossible and fused them together, and supported it with some of the best software they've ever made, yeah, I had to include this as number 1. Of course, you know what I'm talking about. That at number 1 is the Nintendo Switch. This thing is crazy. I remember when that original reveal trailer dropped back in, October 2016, I'm like, they can't do this. We heard about the rumors. It's a hybrid console. No way. No way. Impossible. Seeing them play Breath of the Wild, and then all of a sudden, flip it out, and all of a sudden it goes to this screen, mind-blowing. Especially as someone who loves handheld. I play this mostly handheld to this day. I love options. I am obsessed with options, and the Switch has so many options. Not in terms of customization. That's the big thing for me. One of the big lackluster things, especially compared to the 3DS. The 3DS has some of the best customization. This has some of the worst customization. I really hope that's something they fix for the next Switch, which I hope is just another more powerful Switch. I love this. I don't want Nintendo to ever stop making these. I don't want Nintendo to ever stop making the Switches. I know they will have to stop one day, but at least for the foreseeable future, for many, many years, I hope they keep just iterating on this thing because I love this form factor. I'm one of those crazy people, right? Like I said, I play handheld. I don't do tabletop much anymore. I did early on with Breath of the Wild when I first got my Switch. I still do some docks, but I'm one of those crazy people that plays with the Joy-Con separately. I really like the Joy-Con, and I know most people don't, and it's totally valid. I never use them as like 2 small controllers for 2-player right there, but I love playing. This is how I play my games. Remember that in the Switch presentation with Koizumi leaning back on the couch being like, I can relax and play Mario Odyssey. That's what I do. I do that all the time. I could be like going like this and be like, oh, I'm playing, not even playing Samba de Amigo. I could be like, oh, I'm playing the most tame. What's the most tame Switch game ever? Not Ring Fit. I don't know. So Kirby Forgotten Land. This is me playing Kirby Forgotten Land. But I love the options that you can connect to Pro Controller. You can put this on a Joy-Con grip. You can play them separately, like me, like I'm being crazy. You can do so much stuff, and not only that, like, okay, I will say, it's outdated hardware. That is the other big sticking point with this thing. The customization, and of course, a lot of compromises when it comes to the games on here. The hardware is not great. You know, not a lot of RAM. Resolution's decent, but performance-wise, in terms of frame rate, can be kind of iffy with certain games, even first-party ones. But for me, I would gladly trade off performance and customization to get this form factor. This is amazing to me. And not only that, but the software, bro. Mario Odyssey, one of my favorite 3D Mario platformers. Say what you will, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, not my favorite Zelda games, but fantastic Zelda games nonetheless. Kirby Forgotten Land, finally getting 3D Kirby. Like I said earlier, a lot of the great Wii U games coming over to this thing because they're just so good. Metroid freaking Dread, one of my favorite games of all time now. Supposedly Prime 4, we'll see about that. And I know Mario Kart 8, my favorite Mario Kart game. Smash Ultimate, the definitive Smash Brothers game. Rock Back Good Mario Party. Like that's just scratching the surface. The third-party support, I want to say, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, this might be the best third-party support Nintendo's ever had. Right? I mean, maybe not as much compared to like NES days, but in recent memory, yeah, it's some of the best they've ever had. And like, yeah, like you're sacrificing performance and customization for the form factor. To me, especially someone who loves handheld gaming, 100% worth it. I love being able to just open it up, go to the menu, and just pick a game from my menu. Play Vampire Survivors, play Ring Fit in handheld mode. I've never done that, I never will. But the fact that it's there, making fitness fun too. Like, come on. It's just, it's so good. It's so good. And of course, say what you will about the NSO service. You don't have to rebuy your virtual console games at the very least, but you still got to pay for a subscription. It's definitely lacking in features. It is definitely lacking in performance. But the form factor for me, and it's lacking shop music, big thing. The form factor, I would trade that off any day. I am so happy the Switch exists because as someone who prefers handheld gaming but still likes to be able to play console gaming when I can, this is the dream machine. And like I said, I'm really hoping the next piece of hardware that Nintendo does is just a more powerful version of this with more customization options. Boom, that's now my favorite system ever. Like, it's so good. So many, like I said, the Nintendo Switch is the definition of options in video game hardware form. Love it, love it, love it. I hope they continue to do this. But with that is going to do it for my top 5 favorite pieces of video game hardware. To kind of go over the list again, number 5 for me was the Series X. Number 4 was the Nintendo 3DS. Number 3 was the Game Boy Advance. Number 2 was the Sega Dreamcast. And of course, number 1, the Nintendo Switch. Love this thing to death. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it if you made it all the way through. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite piece of video game hardware is. Why should the GameCube have been on this list? Why is the Dreamcast the worst piece of hardware ever made and Sega should burn in hell? If you say that, I'm blocking you. With that, though, thank you so much for watching. I will catch you all on the next video or live stream. And until then, keep gaming. I'll see you later.